it was mostly landowner driven stuff. I went and I pretty much met with like every partner. Like I'd go in person, but a lot of the functions I go to were like kind of specific to landowners. And yeah, so it was just like trying to FaceTime, I guess, as much as possible. But
Um, uh, was there mistrust of you because you were, lived outside of the area then? You talked about that real briefly back there. Just because you didn't live in Malheur, they kind of saw you as an outsider?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would, I might have misheard you wrong, but I don't necessarily think there's mistrust of me. I think that it's just hard for me to get to know people and like kind of establish myself in. It just took more effort on my end to let folks know that I'm here and I want to be here to help this group figure something out and like achieve a common goal. I think that another challenge in the Malheur area is that there has been a lot of turnover with like all the organizations. And so I think that
Which
probably would.
You're referring to?
I think BLM, ODFW, potentially, probably mostly BLM, which is really important because 80% of the land in the that LIT area is administered by BLM. And so it's really hard for landowners or allotment holders, I guess, and even landowners to build those relationships with the BLM folks if they're constantly turning over. And like, those are some of the people that they, work probably closely with. And then I think that like having that, I think they're pretty well, I think the people who are in the office now they've been there for a little while now and there's been less turnover. And I think there will be less turnover for a while. Like that's kind of my understanding. But in the past, there was a lot of turnover. And I think it just made it harder for them to build positive relationships with the landowners. And so it just probably doesn't make it easier for me to try and come in and like, as an outsider, not living there, to become established in that community and like build those relationships and, just reassure folks that like, I'm here like for for a while. And, but it seems like I from my perspective, it seems like folks are, I call people now, like whether it's BLM or OSU Extension or the county or a landowner, and folks know who I am and they like know why I'm calling, and they're like, oh, hey, how's it going? So it's just taken a lot of phone calls and like just like, hi.
Okay. Well, thanks for chatting about that for such a long time. I'd love to keep chatting, but I also want to respect your time here. You got your hands full. So let's switch gears a little bit. I just want to talk about fire, and since that is another focus, and how it interacts with your job and your life, I guess. So can you talk a little bit about when you started learning about wildfire in your job and how it impacts even your current role a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, let's see. I mean, when I personally learned about fire, is that what?
Either way.
Like within the scope of my job, or?
Yeah, sure. Or I mean, even on your personal side, I mean, you can even talk about your previous training, if you went to school, where you went to school, etc. How haven't really talked about that at all. So,
Mhm.
yeah, feel free
Yeah.
to
Okay.
talk about it in any wide sense. Just kind of
Okay.
how it's interacted with your whole life. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I grew up in Western Oregon where, like fires are very different. I mean, you're still wildfires, but just how they behave is very different. And then I did like school and some jobs, and it was in 2015, I actually started working on research. So I was a technician on a sage grouse research study out in the Trout Creeks. And I would say that's probably where that was like my first job in a rangeland setting. Are you familiar with the Trout Creeks?
Yeah.
Okay. And so there's the Holloway fire that happened in 2012 or 13. The whole premise of this sage grouse study was to kind of look at the impacts of that fire on sage grouse populations down there. And so I would say that's probably where I kind of got my first like intro to rangeland wildfires and how the systems change and are impacted by uncontrolled wildfires. And so then before I came here, I had another job with Pheasants Forever in Central Washington, working with sage grouse, kind of helping landowners to do conservation actions that would benefit sage grouse. And a lot of the work that we would do up there was like improved grazing systems, because wildfire is like one of the biggest threats to sage grouse up in Central Washington. So I guess, a lot of the work that I've done in like my professional career, I guess, which has been pretty short, has mostly been trying to help other practitioners or landowners like find the resources to deal with wildfires, or I guess anything, but since we're talking about wildfires, like kind of either find the funding or like whatever the resources might be to help kind of plan, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Do planning.
Sure. Did you have a degree? I'm sorry, you mentioned you were a research tech. Do you have a degree in a related field?
Yeah, I just have a bachelor's in fish and wildlife from Oregon State. So I am sure that we talked about rangeland fires and those systems, but if we did, I don't really remember it.
Understand. So you mentioned the Holloway fire and your experience in Trout Creek. Can you talk a little bit about maybe describe the process of recovery? Did you get to see that while you were doing some research?
No, I didn't. So when I got there, I think it was like 2 or 3 years after the fire, and Lee Foster, who was the initial student on that project, he started his research, I think, like right after the fire started, and then I was, I was just a technician, but I came on a couple years after that study had started, and so we worked across the Trout Creeks in landscapes that had been impacted by the wildfire and places that had not. So I did get to see similar ecosites in 2 different, conditions. But I'm trying to think if there's.
Yeah, if you have anything to say about the process of recovery or the kind of different things that you were noticing while you were doing some of that research work in Trout Creek.
I don't have a ton